couple of really great people here to actually talk about the technical work that I honestly think is way over my head. Before we get started, I do want to explain that this webinar and all of our GTM revenue assets are kind of sponsored by HubSpot and Apollo. We're part of a partner growth accelerator program. We've created a resource library. You'll notice that very clever QR code in the top right, and we'll drop the link in the chat. But this sends you to just a pool of resources we've been investing in. I will say things are changing all the time, and so is the information on that link, because we want to keep you informed. Let's talk about who we have today. First, I'm very excited to introduce everybody to Brandon Rice. He's from Apollo. You are amazing. We did a little pre-studio session, and I got to find out that he's a former HubSpot partner. He's been working at Apollo for a while. If you want to just say a quick hello, and what's your favorite new thing about Apollo software right now?
Sure. So yeah, based in New York. Nice to meet you all, I guess, again, formally on live. But yeah, so a little bit about me. Come from the HubSpot ecosystem, actually. Just recently joined Apollo. It's been about a quarter. And newest feature, I mean, the assistant has been incredible. Just like what a way to enable users who don't want to get bogged down with all the new feature updates and UX UI changes we're making. So yeah, been excited about it.
And you're talking about the AI assistant. You can basically just talk to it and build segments and email scripts and sequences and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's like crafting outbound sequences, finding decision makers, all that work that took several clicks now is just, plain English, type and get an output. So
even your old school manufacturing salespeople can get into this, which is pretty wild. Next on the list is one of my favorite humans on the planet, Amber Chemist. She's the director of revenue at Growth. Quick hello, where are you from, and what's something that's happening in GTM that you're finding a lot of excitement around?
Hi, everybody. Chris, I'll Venmo you for that very glowing compliment there. I'm Amber Chemist. I have been in the HubSpot ecosystem for over a decade. I've got to serve clients for a long time, and then build out their go-to-market motions. But over the last year, I've been in that for growth. And so I actually am an Apollo HubSpot user, really the end user that we're trying to serve in today's discussion. So excited to bring what I've learned, the good, the bad, and the ugly to the conversation.
Love it. Almost last but not least, Brandon Dithberry. He is now at Growth. We acquired his GTME firm recently, and he's our Director of Technical Solutions. A little bit about yourself and what's something happening in GTM that you're loving right now?
I am in Utah, and in terms of things that are happening right now in go-to-market that I'm excited for, I would say just the ability to do so much in a more automated way with AI assisting. There's just so many components that we'll get into this, but there's so many components that I would have to do manually that you can do now with AI assistants that you could never do before, and it makes it so much faster to go to market.
Yeah, I agree. And then for everybody, I'm Chris Nault, the founder and CEO of Growth. I'm moderating this panel. Usually I have a lot more to say, but this is definitely getting into the technical stuff. For my cute GTM thing, I am still head over heels with all things ABM. Like the software keeps getting better, 20-year marketer the old school way. I just am fascinated by this stuff. Now let's rip right into it. Oh, cool. Today we're going to be talking about systems architecture, exactly how HubSpot and Apollo can combine to create that revenue engine. We're going to be talking about tactics. We're going to be talking AI, and then we're going to talk about real workflows. And we at Growth use these tools. We have an event tomorrow in San Francisco, and 100% of the attendees, that very strict ICP, were booked through the tactics that we're going to talk about today. I want to make some quick assumptions because this program is not for solopreneurs and founders of one. There's space for that. This ain't it. I'm assuming that you have HubSpot Sales Pro or Enterprise and CRM. You've got to have the automation and reporting capabilities. I'm going to make the assumption that you are an Apollo using organization, that you have the organizational tier, which means that you have at least 5 sales seats. With that, I'm also going to assume that you have a defined ICP and you're not just trying to blast a million companies because they buy stuff. And I'm also going to make the assumption that you have RevOps, marketing ops, and sales ops in some capacity. It looks different at very different orgs, but I'm going to assume that these are things that you know and you are either one of or managing. Or if you're just here to learn, that's okay too. If you do not have the software that I just discussed, good news. Myself, Amber, Brandon, we've been in the game of helping people with procurement on the software side. We can run demos for both HubSpot and Apollo. We are here to help you buy better, get it implemented, so that way you can be adjusting your revenue strategies next year. I can't help it. I'm a shameless plugger all the time. Let's make a couple of notes too. This is not for like new companies. You should be established. You should have a brand that resonates and already has market presence. You should already be doing some form of customer marketing. I'll even take you getting reviews on a platform as a check of that box. You have a compelling offer. You're not just saying, hey, I'm here, buy stuff. You are relentlessly consistent across your channels, i.e. you have a marketing and sales team. It's very important to talk about the culture and mindset. Like ABM, outbound, this stuff is iterative. So you're going to have to make lots of changes over time. The biggest failure I see with companies is yes, I'll do that, and then no, it won't happen 2 weeks into it. Like this is a hands-on game. Again, the crystal clear ICP. We're going to be targeting 50, 100 people at a time over the course of weeks and months, not 10,000 people a day. And then, like I said, the iteration is critical. There's no way, well, maybe there's a way, but I have yet to see any company nail a campaign day one, button one. Is there anything that you all see as like a must-have when we're talking about go-to-market revenue strategy in this conversation that I missed? No notes. Love that. I've obviously been doing this a while.
Nailed it.
Okay. That aside, now we're getting into the stuff where I start to kind of like brown out a little bit. This is all about personalizing the go-to-market content. This is the heart of it, right? Amber, I know that this is an area that we talk about a lot at Growth. I would love for you to just run through this document and the mindset.
Yeah. I think there's like, as we've gotten into this like go-to-market world, we think a lot about the technical, the engineering side of it, which is important, but and it's amazing the number of conversations I have in a given week where people, what they don't understand and what they don't know how to get started on is actually mapping out who their audience is and then the types of content and key messages that are going to be important across the journey. So in this go-to-market journey mapping in this example, it is looking at who are the stakeholders, because there's going to be different ones along the way, right? Towards the end, there's going to be procurement, for example. And if we think about how that ties back into Apollo or HubSpot, we've got to make sure that we're enriching with all of those people that are key to the buying group along the way. And then from a creating content and coming with the right messaging, starting and blasting your outbound, like people with outbound messages that say, hey, do you want to have a conversation, is not going to go anywhere today. So what this does is it helps you see what are the pain points and the things that people are asking as they go through go through that whole journey along the way. And let me say, it's not linear, but this will give you the content you need to feed in at different points, even if somebody might regress a little bit on their journey. And then go use the tools and engineer a system that's going to essentially actually create value in each of those conversations. Yes, AI is great. Yes, these tools are great. But if you come to someone with an empty message that just says, book a call with me, you're probably not going to get a conversation started. So create tools. This journey mapping is, shameless plug, a tool that will be available on that QR code. But it is one of those things that we offer our prospects in the buying process to help them figure out that what they need to do next. And part of that is figuring out what content to create to power the engines that the smart Brandons are going to talk about in a bit.
Speaking of smart Brandons, Brandon from Apollo, when you look at this GTM content doc, right, and we're talking audience and journey and offer, with you working at Apollo now, what stands out as like a critical important part, or maybe even like the biggest miss that you see most frequently?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the biggest miss is going to be mismatch of messaging in terms of how you're selling your product versus the audience that you're going after. I mean, this was something that I was dealing with when I was in the kind of partner HubSpot ecosystem. And especially now, we have this feature in Apollo called the Content Center, basically like a psychological profile that you set up of your organization that informs our AI on how to speak on your behalf, build that personalization, et cetera. And most of that is pulled off of your website. And anytime we identify mismatches, it's an immediate call of attention to, do we talk about our products differently? Are services, are there more applications to our services than what we were previously either set up for, et cetera, based off of like the changing economic dynamic in the world, right? Maybe you created a product that had one use case, now there are several. Has your website been updated for that, right? And how does that inform the way that you speak on it in outbound cadences? So that's the biggest miss, I think.
Honestly,
sure.
I have been using Apollo myself lately, and I wasn't even aware that that was available. So that'll be a fun weekend activity for me. Um, I do want to talk a little bit about the offer. I mean, we have so much to chat about, but it's so critical when we're talking about personalization and messaging to just be a human. And in ABM tactics with Outbound, you are trying to have a conversation, not hit them over the head with a quick sale. And doesn't matter who I talk to when people are introduced to this topic, they just cannot get over the transactional, I would say old school boomer mindset of how marketing, like real relationship marketing works. And it's challenging, but necessary. I'm going to just keep moving on for time. If anybody has any questions, you can drop them in the chat, of course. And obviously, like I'm easy to get a hold of on LinkedIn. I'm sure we're all aware of that. Let's talk a little bit about why HubSpot and Apollo together are modern GTM engine. Who wants to take the lead on this one? Don't jump into it.
That's me.
That's right.
If you ain't first, you're last, everybody. All right. So I like to think about HubSpot as it is your core CRM. And I know Apollo has some of these capabilities, but for us, and I think what works for the general market is that HubSpot is really great at being your system of record. It gives you that unified customer view if you're using it for customer service, marketing, all of those activities. And even if you're doing outreach on Apollo, is going to come back as a central customer view. And it allows you to automate at scale at different points in the journey, both for marketing and sales. And then ultimately, how's all that working? Where, if I'm investing dollars into Apollo outreach, is that actually turning into forecasted revenue? HubSpot does a great job at that. And on the flip side, yes, HubSpot now has free enrichment, but only for people like organically inbound wise getting into your database. So when you're running an ABM campaign or an outbound campaign and you need to build your database, if you need to go out and find people that aren't already there, that's where Apollo shines. 250 million plus contact database companies. I don't know what that breaks down to. Someone else can do the math, but it's a large amount. So many. And what I love, just to give you an use case of like the advanced prospecting filters, we recently ran a campaign where we needed to understand how many salespeople were on the team. There's no other enrichment tool out there that was allowing us to find, do they have 50 plus salespeople on their team? HubSpot's prospecting in AI agent allowed us to be able to see that and find that data. So it's really awesome for that. Intent signals as well. So combining sort of demographic, firmographic, technographic information to create outbound sequencing. And through that, there are different points in that buyer's journey. If we go back to I'm not gonna make it go back to it, but if we go back to what I talked about before, when you're early in that awareness phase, Apollo is great at helping you discover, create that initial outreach, and then you move over to HubSpot. Now, all of it's going to show up in HubSpot anyways to essentially activate and convert people into the funnel and be able to see, is this translating into revenue? So they work together really well, both because they have great strengths in different ways.
Yeah, and there's a few different ways to set it up, and we're going to talk about that too. And we can easily acknowledge that both tools have evolved a lot in even the last year or two. And, you know, the BDB, him and I first met, we were both on the customer advisory board for Apollo like several years ago. And I would say that this HubSpot and Apollo conversation was still relevant, but certainly like different. Either Brandon, do you typically, and we might talk about this again later, but like, do you typically see companies running all of their campaigns inside of HubSpot, meaning like the first round of outbound? Are they doing it separately in Apollo?
Yeah,
Or a little bit of both?
that's a good question. I get it a lot. People are always asking like, oh, can I do outbound with HubSpot? And that's exactly when I say use Apollo, please, because Apollo is better set up for outbound. And there are so many reasons why, but mainly with HubSpot, it's really better for warm leads. And that's how their system is configured. It's actually also a part of their end user agreement. It's, do you have permission to actually reach out to the people that are in your database in HubSpot? Apollo is great because you can reach out to people who are cold. And there's also new features that allow you to warm up your emails, things like that, where you don't have to worry as much about using Apollo when you send mass emails. Whereas with HubSpot, in the past, I've had teams where, we tried to do outbound at first and we were getting locked out of our Gmail accounts because HubSpot's just not made for that. So, and that would take sometimes a week to get a rep back into their Google account, right? So it is definitely better to do outbound and more top of funnel and things like that through Apollo, especially when you have more complex filtering logic and things like that to find the right people as well in HubSpot, or sorry, Apollo.
And we're talking about like a lot of this conversation is like net new logo acquisition, but it's not like Apollo and HubSpot together need to be only focused on that too. It's a really good way to cross-sell into different departments for large organizations, right? Apollo Brandon was sharing some anecdotes earlier this week that kind of shocked me too. Like creating it, and definitely tell me if I am wrong because I am not the smartest person on this call by 3. Custom coded workflows inside of HubSpot. You can use tokens to essentially use the Claude or perplexity based actions inside of Apollo, and that to me is when you would use HubSpot first, meaning that is your re-engagement. These are semi-warm leads, but still be able to use the superpower that is Apollo. Does that sound generally accurate?
Yeah, it definitely is. So what's neat is actually you don't need custom coded workflows. You can actually map natively from whatever field you've created with your AI prompt in Apollo to whatever is the equivalent in your HubSpot instance, either on the contact level or the company level. And then what we're seeing organizations do is they'll almost use our copywriter, again, with the Claude tool especially, to draft whatever, if it's either a response or an initial outbound email or even a re-engagement sequence, what have you. They port that copy over to the contact, and then they use that property as the placeholder. So kind of like how you do hi, first name, comma, space, instead of then drafting what I'm sure is that laborious set of paragraphs or sentences plural, you would then just put the placeholder for your Apollo prompt and take it from there. Hyper-personalized. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I could do a whole webinar about that, like first intro, that like, how are you doing or not? Another conversation for another time. Okay, we're going to talk deal tracking and reporting, the HubSpot advantage, and also lean into like, what are the metrics that we want to be talking about tracking in these sorts of programs? Amber, I just lean in on you for this sort of conversation.
Yeah, because I manage a pipeline.
I mean, maybe.
Looking pretty right now in Q4. HubSpot's forecasting is amazing. I literally live on my dashboard at least an hour a day, my deal dashboard, and it allows us to understand why are we winning, why are we losing revenue, and at the end of the day, it's great for that purpose. But the engagement metrics are key. Being able to see we were doing a lot of outbound outreach via Apollo earlier this year, and I used HubSpot to understand which ones are actually working and netting us a net new opportunity, and which ones aren't able to do that. So it's great at saying, hey, we're doing these activities earlier in the funnel. Is that actually translating into revenue and a deal at the end of the day? And it allows us to have all of our reporting in HubSpot because Apollo does a great job of setting that data back essentially to the same exact activity, whether the activity is an email that I send out of Apollo or it's an email I send out of HubSpot. It looks at the data the same way, so I can see those two stacked together.
Yeah, well said. And I don't want to say too, like there's definitely multiple ways to do this, right? What we're coming at, this is the system that Growth has designed that we have shown that works, and it includes the iterative moments we've had over years. So there's overlap. We'll talk about that in a second. Here's why I listed these key metrics to track, because this is a pretty popular conversation too. One, as soon as I get asked this, I get like cringe just a little bit because I know where this is going. We need the transactional relationship tracked. Amber knows I hate that word transactional, but it's part of the game. Email replies, very important metric. There's lots of vanity numbers, 2%, 10%, 20%. Well, I think it'll really depend on the type of email that you're sending and whether or not it warrants a reply, if that's a KPI that can be tracked, and then you decide what good is. Fair. Meetings booked, same conversation. Example, customer, shout out. Their sales team reached out and it was basically like, hey, I don't think they realize our back behind the scenes relationship, but hey, we've seen that you're using our enterprise tools. Are you interested in chatting? And the way it was positioned was the next step is to book a meeting with me. I was interested. I did book a meeting. Poof, that's an important KPI. If you're putting it in the footer and it makes no sense, don't use that as like a flagpole metric. Open rate, again, very good, but also can be kind of bullshit depending on what tool you're using and what open rate really means. We have examples of it showing like 30 and 80 email opens. Is that purely with like the Gmail on someone's phone loading? It depends. Companies and contacts reach. I think this is a very important one to track, especially when you're talking net new logo acquisition. Being able to tell the board or your senior leadership, hey, we were able to chat with 246 companies this quarter. We averaged, 4.5 people for each company that we were actually to get engage emails and see ads run. That to me is a measurable KPI, and you can see the good and the bad from that. If you start seeing too many zeros in the company's reached, you're doing this wrong. Pipeline generated, influenced revenue, very important superpower of HubSpot. We do want to see that dollars are being generated. We do want to see closed won revenue, personal favorite, and then just marketing metrics in general. Is your website traffic going up? More views on your web page? Are you seeing more engagement on LinkedIn? Are you seeing more engagement for the thought leaders at your companies? When you're kind of cultivating this ecosystem, you will see positive all around the board. For the panel, any other key metrics that you would recommend tracking?
I think that question that Perry just dropped is really important, which is being able to track open and link clicks and things like that, which is definitely really powerful, especially if you have assets in HubSpot. If people are engaging with your content, that's stuff that you can track easily with HubSpot, and definitely is worth it to measure that as a KPI. It's good for understanding more of mid-funnel, especially when you have that traffic coming to your website. But what's that next step, right? What are they actually looking at? What are they engaging with? What content are they downloading? And that's all stuff that you can track with HubSpot.
Yeah, and Perry, I know like the common counter to that is HubSpot loads a tracking pixel. It can impact deliverability. But to what Brandon's saying, like you're going to prioritize getting people the information they need and the trackability. And if you start to see a decrease in open click rates, anything like that, HubSpot, or bounce rates, because you're hitting firewalls, like then maybe make an adjustment, but don't start with trimming that out. Because if you don't know if people are opening it, like you don't know if you're creating great things that are going to land in their inbox anyways.
Yeah. Apollo, Brandon, what are your thoughts? Because you've got a tracking tool with Apollo, right?
Yeah, so the one that's interesting that it's not here, but I reference it a lot is actually bounces. And especially in Apollo, we have the job change feature, which is huge. I just find that a lot of our users will pretty much ignore when we're flagging that there's been some organizational changes, which are ripe for opportunity in terms of having your prior hunting behaviors enrich the work that you're doing rather than like having to always go net new, playing with your filters every time. Bouncing in or failure is still an output that can be beneficial when used correctly, right? And that's a big thing that we lean on at Apollo.
And I think there's two popular conversations around that. One is if you've already with a vendor and their director of marketing moves companies, like they may or may not have had the opportunity to tell you, but you can flag that and turn that into a, hey, do you want to pull us over here? And then to feed a more personalized conversation for their replacement. Hey, I worked with Amber for a while. She was great. We were kind of on hold for like a Q4 project. What are some of your priorities into 2026? And then it's like, oh, this is a real conversation that feels so nice. Versus, hey, welcome to your job. Buy my shit. So, sorry about that. Oops, did I do that right? Yes. Okay, cool. Let's talk about integration strategy. What lives where and why? Who's taking the reins on this one?
I'll take a stab, but I know that Brennan from Apollo is going to probably correct me on some things.
Excellent.
So in the past, one of the challenges that I had with HubSpot and Apollo was the integration, right? Because I set it up improperly. So Brandon, please jump in. But I think there's a big challenge with making sure that the data is up to date in a CRM. I think it's something that everybody wants to have, and with a tool like Apollo, you can do that. And there is ways to configure it properly. I'm gonna say I probably did not do that properly. So I would love to hear from Brandon at Apollo what your thoughts are on how do you actually set up that integration between the two systems in a way that's the most optimal.
Yeah, I actually just set this up this morning with a customer, so super appropriate conversation. But what we're finding, and this is probably going to kind of sneak peek into further down this conversation, is this thing about operating from lists versus searches, right? So a search is the Apollo equivalent almost of like an active list, except it's not just for records that you own or records that you saved, but also net new prospects, right? So individuals you haven't reached out to yet. What's really ideal about leaning into the search model is that it takes into account things like organizational changes or updates that a list wouldn't normally capture, because a list is stale the second that you create it, right? It should act more as like a printout or a validator that a contact has gone through a particular flow, not something that you're building to then send one-off campaigns with, right? So in an ideal universe, it looks something like creating or setting your parameters, saving those parameters as a search, creating automation that says enrich with waterfall, the email address, the phone number, and then do any other additional formatting within Apollo. And only at the end of that flow are we then pushing into HubSpot, right? So by the time it's in your CRM, it's gone through the qualification processes, all that formatting that probably is bogging down your RevOps org already, right? It's all done outside of the system. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is components that were most likely added more recently, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, because this was maybe a couple of years ago that I was trying to do all this, but it's incredible to see how far Apollo's come in such a short amount of time. At the time when I was setting up the integration, it was more of like, let's just send everything, enrich everything, and just turn on sort of overwriting and stuff like that. But to know that you can now customize the data that's enriching HubSpot is incredible.
Can you do that with the native like the integration that is in the HubSpot marketplace? Is that what you're using?
Is that for
Yeah.
for me? Yeah. It's just the native integration that we have set up. There's nothing, there's no additional work that needs to be done, no custom coded actions. That's all native. And it can even be set up once you integrate HubSpot with Apollo, you can then manage the rest of those settings from Apollo directly.
As a avid internet user, I will say that the rating is low when you look at it. I think it's like a 2.8, which is scary, but the integration's been around for a really long time. And so if you look at the most recent reviews, 5-star, high star makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's just like the nature of the app, right? It's been around for a while. So like, don't freak out too bad. And you can talk to Apollo or to HubSpot or ideally us, and we can help you out with all that stuff.
I also always say take those reviews with a grain of salt, because like if you ask my mom to change like a carburetor out of her own car, and then and there was a review marketplace for doing that, she would give it a bad rating because she has no clue how to change a tire, let alone work on the engine.
Me and your mom have a lot in common. I can't do integrations. I also can't fix cars.
Yeah, but it does. I think it does illuminate the need to like know those things like Brandon just called out, because if you don't know them and you're doing it blind, like you're probably going to run into hurdles.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it's just important to call out. And I think there's even a review in there that prompted me to create this slide. The reality is that Apollo as a stand-up product has a ton of really great features that HubSpot as a standalone product also has. And that's okay. You're going to find as you're building your tech stack and your solutions, and as your company is evolving, there's going to be areas where that is happening. Particularly the areas that I come across most often when I'm talking about why would I buy HubSpot or why would I buy Apollo if one can do this, is the one-to-one email sending. Like we said, both tools have it. Apollo is designed literally around that kind of like cold, we'll say warm outreach, whereas HubSpot, as basically the trust token has already been generated. Calling and logging. This is a newer feature for Apollo. It's still great. You can record all the calls live. I don't have any personal experience with customers using it like in the field type logging. But again, both have that outbound feature. And I think you can, I know with HubSpot, you can bolt on third-party tools. And I assume that Brandon from Apollo, can you bolt on third-party calling tools onto Apollo as well?
So you can't currently, but what you can do is, and it's been super valuable for folks in the field, is bridging the number from Apollo onto your physical device, and also layering the parallel dialer with the waterfall feature, especially for international customers. Phone number validation has probably never been as easy as it is now. Yeah.
That is, you know what, like, I don't know if I erased that slide or not, but the waterfall enrichment deserved its own slide. I think I may have cut it for time. Essentially, actually, Brandon from Apollo, you just explain what data enrichment is at Apollo. So high level.
Yeah, I mean, again, if the name waterfall, I think gives a good visual, right? So the idea is if you can't, or if we can't validate or verify the email address that you have on file, we'll check with at least one other provider. You as the organization or the user has full control over what those providers are. Many of them are pretty much the same cost in terms of credit to Apollo, which is what makes all these providers super accessible, but that's ultimately how it works. So it's just another validator. Email address, I think has been helpful, but phone numbers have been the big win.
Am I crazy for thinking there's a data enrichment for like IP address? Did I make that up in my mind?
I think you did, except we are expanding waterfall, but there's more to come on that piece. Yeah.
Cool. Is Bombora one of the data enrichment partners?
That's a buying intent partner. Yeah.
They do the Lord's work. It's phenomenal. Again, contact management can happen in both universes. Depends on how you're using it. Task automation as well. I use both Apollo and HubSpot sequences tools for different reasons. Both are really powerful. We're not talking about like the startup kits here, as a reminder. Fun topic. Now we're going to start talking about hyper-personalization, and not that weird, hey, I know that you live 3 miles from a Chili's. Do you want to go have a margarita type personalization? That's the worst. Who wants to open up with hyper-personalization and what's working?
I just spoke. I can.
Yeah. Brandon kind of like, I think, but here's the visual to show what Brandon was talking about.
Yeah, so I can just give some more context. I didn't want to hog the space, so to speak, but yeah. So I think the visual really drives the point home, where you could either have the Claude copywriter provide all of the information that you need for that email if you're doing your testing in Apollo, or you can use it in tandem with your own copy from within HubSpot. We're seeing combinations of both, which is really interesting. And I think also the takeaway with Apollo is that you can stack your power-ups, right? So you can effectively do a set of researching power-ups that then feed the copywriter. So you're not just using the basic kind of out-of-the-box information we have on each contact. So again, hyper-personalization in a way that I've not experienced before with other tools.
Yeah, and Brandon, when we were talking about this in our prep session, I was like, well, wait, doesn't the prospecting agent do this? But I've used both. And I think the reality of the prospecting agent is it's based on seller profile and it's not powered by Claude. And the reality is that Claude is better at writing personalized messages based on the information fed to it, which Apollo is doing a great job of doing that. So if you're out there and you're like, oh, I want to use the prospecting agent instead of Apollo, like there's probably a place for both. But I would say if you want to be hyper personalized, Apollo's pulling in Claude is going to give you that personalization at a better level than HubSpot's prospecting agent.
Big conversation in like the HubSpot universe right now is like, are we charging based on tokens or usage? Or I guess usage and tokens are the same thing. How does Apollo handle those sorts of transactions within the software?
I love this question. So we are on a credit-based model, and there's a variety of reasons why we do that. The biggest one is affording you flexibility. So we moved to a unified credit model. We no longer segment. You have credits for mobile numbers, credit for emails, et cetera. You have one massive bucket. You then decide as an organization how you want to use it. So that's where the value of turning waterfall on, that becomes a big, part of your day-to-day. But what also helps is we offer a variety of LLMs, right? So not just Claude, but you would use them for very specific reasons. And there's descriptors in our platform that explains what scenarios you'd use which tools in. That allows us to keep the credit usage down to 1 credit per run.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of conversations in like the CFO and revenue side of things. It's like, how do we budget for tools and things that we don't know exist yet? Ancillary budgets, intentional like sectioning to make sure that you always have room. Right now, that room is needed for AI things. So just be aware. Anything else on the hyper personalization side? The screenshots from a workflow inside of HubSpot. Using a token from Apollo's personalization message.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand what are the needle movers, what data points are the needle movers to add into personalization. And that, of course, is going to change for every company, but I would shy away from using very common data points. So industry specific and things like that is great, but you want to get a little bit further than that. You can sniff it out really quick when you can see people's personalization and it's very generic. So try to get creative and find ways that, data points that are obviously appropriate for your ICP, but that also are a little bit more creative. And I can, as an example, I worked for a legal marketing company. And one of the things that we would look into was we would use enrichment to find specifically the practice area, and even sometimes go deeper than that. So we would look at specific types of cases that they would go after and the number of attorneys, which can be found on their website with scraping and things like that. So getting really creative with those is really helpful. And you can do those things in both Apollo and with HubSpot with the new AI features.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of bad personalization. It's fun when you hit it right and it just has that like human quality. The person will open and read the email, period. And that is one of the beautiful things about ABM that has never been in just this universe in general. from a marketer standpoint, until these tools became public, you couldn't do that. I obviously still love this stuff. We're gonna keep it moving. Let's talk about rethinking lead scoring. This was inspired by Brandon from Apollo's conversation earlier this week, which I just thought was really great. But essentially, there's a new way to look at it. Like, you've got two machines running. Who wants to take the lead on this one?
Brand.
I mean, I could keep going.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think my biggest concern when organizations are adopting new technology is that they're just kind of replicating all the stuff that exists and is operating seamlessly in one tool into another. I just don't think it's an efficient use of budget or time. So something that I oftentimes suggest is with Apollo sitting on the top of the funnel, right? So to Brandon's point about how you should really be pushing records in and messaging them in HubSpot once you have that consent, you've built some kind of initial relationship with them. You should then maybe use the scoring model in Apollo as your qualification scoring model versus like a discovery rubric that you're building in your lead scoring tool within HubSpot. And there's kind of a beauty in that, right? Where you have two separate rubrics. They don't have to be overly complicated, and they inform one another on, are we asking the right questions for qualification? Like if a deal ends up being created and we find out that we're missing something much earlier on, that should then, as a feedback loop, inform how you're doing that, qualification process within Apollo. That's just one of many examples. It's also a great check and balance on just your process as an organization. So,
I mean, when you're using Apollo to find new companies, you already know they're qualified based on some of your like ICP pillars, right? So like the location is a popular one. They're in your revenue, what industry they're in, what sub industry within the industry they're in. If you're a company like Growth, what technology are these companies using? So some of the key aspects of, okay, this company could be a fit. So then that's why you do the outreach, and whether or not you share that information with them is up to you. I like saying it. When it comes to the situation and the psychology of this, is they may be qualified from a company standpoint, but they just might not be there yet. And be there could be different if you're a manufacturer that sells replacement dongles. Well, you only sell the replacement, but not the initial. Okay, the initial dongle may not be broken yet, or may not even be scheduled to be broken yet. And that sort of intentful mindfulness in the approach is so important and is so frequently missed. So they're a fit because of these fixed contextual elements. That's the Apollo qualification we're talking about. Once you do the things to have the conversation, a lot of different ways you can do that. Ads, emails, phone calls, show up in a networking event being weird. Then you really have that conversation, and then you can use the HubSpot lead scoring to say, from a scale to a 1 to 100, did they have the meeting? Did they visit the resource links that they sent them? Do they have the budget? And build that scoring model up in a way that is impactful for your business, not just checking a box for an antiquated metric that the board wanted last year. So open up that opportunity to have the conversation. And I think that's the biggest thing going into the next year. We're always talking, I feel like I've always talked about this year's different. This year's different. This year is actually different. And then some of it is like a DNA change. And it makes me really excited. So if you need somebody to have the hard conversations with your board, put me in. That's what I'm here for.
Brandon,
any other thoughts?
I just had a question on the scoring. Can that data get pushed into HubSpot as a property?
Yeah, love this question. Yes, not natively, but there are methods that we can use, just like a quick workflow. I'm actually doing this with yet another customer. They have decided to go with the two-pronged scoring model that we just talked about. So we're pushing not just the scoring from Apollo into HubSpot, but also the scoring from HubSpot into Apollo to then recalibrate the qualification score versus the discovery score. And then kind of the tell if the numbers are off is going to be that forecast furniture. So all those deals that are just kind of sitting and squatting in the middle of what should be the highway of your pipeline, right? That will inform the feedback loop I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, my wheels were spinning because I was, thinking for the top of funnel qualification, pushing that score from Apollo in as a layer to your more bottom of funnel lead scoring in HubSpot seems like an amazing superpower. And just like you said, especially for making sure that your deals are moving through the pipe more efficiently, and maybe you have stalled deals, right? But you have that score that can help your reps prioritize based on both of those components. That's incredible.
Okay, as like a business person that's looking at making these changes, is this something where you need to like full stop something and basically like rebuild the highway? Is it possible to build components of this?
I
Any
think
thoughts?
I always say is like, I always think about scoring, or the first thing I always ask people is like, are you starving or not? and how much time do your reps and resources have? So if they are having a hard time figuring out who are the best people to prospect to and build lists off of, scoring's great in Apollo for that, because it helps you say, okay, only focus your time and energy on these contacts who are meeting a certain threshold. And then when you flip that over to HubSpot, it's the same thing. It's, do I need a prioritization to be able to say, these are the people I should work with? Obviously, there's a component of using it to know what's working and not working. But largely, the reason why scoring is put in place is that it's there to say, who should you prioritize in your prospecting and your pipeline working efforts. And so if you have nobody coming in, if you have all the time in the world to go and prospect Apollo as much as you want, like maybe you don't need to do that. But also, if you're a company who only serves a very niche audience, like plumbers in the state of North Dakota, right? Like scoring might help you prioritize and find those people more effectively, and then exclude all the other people who don't matter at the end of the day.
Amen. So situational awareness is basically the topic of many of these conversations.
Exactly.
And again, if you had questions and you want to talk about this, please let us know. Cool. Let's talk about precise audiences, right? And I think let me just check my slides real quick. Okay, cool. We're going to lean into the precise audiences, and I'm also super interested to talk about this lookalike audience expansion as well. Brandon, Apollo, let's kick it off. What do we got here?
Yeah, so I think the wrong way of prospecting is to always do a net new search or start from zero. I mean, that's really the goal of AI. I think the misconception of AI is that it's going to do 100% of your work. If it does 100%, none of us would be here. But also don't start from zero, right? And so a great example of this is looking at your existing book, identifying a subset of 3 to 5, right, groups of either companies or people. Go into Apollo, find the lookalikes filter, and add them in. We use a combination of several data points to identify potential lookalikes, but especially for organizations that have such niche products or services, they've been finding a lot of value in this feature. I think it just came out of beta, actually, not that long ago. But a good use case for this is not just for like leads who you've converted to customers, but also deals that you lost that you want to replicate similar opportunities. Or if your marketing team wants to run like an objection handling campaign, finding lookalikes for people who are blockers.
Like what you just mentioned, I think is very clever and could be easily lost with all the great things that we're talking about. But going back to this, maybe not the dongle idea, but let's just use growth as an example. If we know that budget tends to be a problem and like ROI is a hard conversation, if you were to take a lookalike audience and hit the CROs, the COOs, the CFOs with basically ad and messaging and LinkedIn and whatever to get in front of them, that like we are, and I'm doing this live, we know that this is expensive. We know that this is risky, but we have factual evidence to show that this investment is necessary and it takes time. That is how you market well. And that's like a B2C trick, bringing it into B2B that I just really love seeing. And when you and I were first chatting about the lookalike audiences, that I first thought was like the antiquated, like, oh, look, the ocean is bigger than I thought. There must be more fish. But really, what AI is also enabling us to do is to think more strategically, and you can move on this stuff pretty quickly without having to shut down the whole infrastructure. Cool. Here's a common question. Do we want to send one-to-one emails from Apollo or HubSpot? We talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that we leaned into the AI functions that Apollo has, right? As growth, we bolt Apollo on top. Probably could have ditched this slide, I guess, in hindsight. But some of the considerations should be the cost of ownership. What are your reporting needs? What's your team makeup? Like, do you have the bodies to live in different systems? And then strategically, what are you hoping to accomplish? I am a huge fan of the new tools inside of Apollo for the email outreach. Can you tell what you are seeing from this image on the screen, Apollo, Brandon?
Yeah, the image is kind of tight. Oh, this is the prompt. Yeah, so this is just an AI prompt. So what I also really appreciate about Apollo is even though we have a number of features and so many pages that you can click into, they're all built using similar products, right? So whether you're accessing Claude from the sequence builder, you're accessing Claude from this page here, it allows you to format the platform to your process. So in this case, for this view, you could draft a prompt and then you can pull that easily into, let's say, a manual email, whether it's a template or an actual manual step in your sequence, or full circle into a property in HubSpot if you wanted to go that route as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I took one of your screenshots and then just kind of cut it up and then realized that I didn't have a way to make it large enough, but very much worth trying. And I would say it's easy enough for any salesperson at any level to use and get things out of. So BDRs, SDRs, 1 year in, 6 months in, even Bob, who's been around the manufacturing firm for 20 years, anybody can at least get into stage 1, level 1 with this, which is using the tool is one of the ways that you gain the knowledge, right, and the experience. Something that I've been hinting at this whole time, and I love this slide because this is the best use of AI image generators ever. Brandon from Growth has talked about how he used Apollo, and Brandon from Apollo is talking about how Apollo is used now. And the biggest conversation is the active list versus the static list. Brandon from Growth, what was the mindset that you have used in the past that made static lists so powerful? And then Brandon from Apollo, I want you to be able to kind of riff on that to how the thought evolution has really turned the corner.
Yeah, so I think the power of static lists is to capture a point in time. Hey, this is a group of or a segment of, my ICP that I'm going after, and you can sort of generate reporting off from that. It also helps to know what you've had in the past of who you've reached out to in that particular segment. So maybe it's, if you are a manufacturing company, it's looking at, okay, well, we have all these different companies in different industries that we service. And so let me put these into different buckets, right? And then kind of measure where we're at. Have we captured 30% of that, or have we captured 40, but it sounds like there's an even better way to do this with Apollo. And so there could be, ways around this with the reporting side of it, without having to rely on the static component. And typically the way that I've built out lists in Apollo is very manual, Brandon from Apollo was saying, don't do, which is, maybe I'll start with a persona per se, but then I'm actually going into the filters and then, manually putting in job titles and things like that. And so just trying to be more prescriptive. But now with AI, it seems like this is not something you have to do anymore.
And also that feels very RevOpsy, very transactional. And I've been gleaning into this growth operations term, and was not an intentional shameless plug, but to me, growth operations, while not defined by Webster yet, is more of an organic mindset around the company's growth and change. Whereas what Brandon of Growth was describing is literally that okay, there are 10,000 companies we want to market to 78% of them. And like, first of all, snooze fest. And then second of all, it's just like not a healthy way to look at people and organizations for revenue. And I'm sorry for being a hippie. I live in Monterey. It's just a byproduct of my environment.
No, I think
yeah.
I think part of it is, from the RevOps perspective, being a RevOps leader, a lot of it comes back to like metrics and trying to measure things, right? And so it's like if you have to have sort of static value to be able to do that. But the challenge that I see in that, and I think it's exactly what you're saying, is it is very static. It's not very dynamic. And so things are changing all the time with businesses. And just like Brandon from Apollo mentioned earlier, with job changes and things like that, there's so much that happens that, something Apollo's not keeping up with that information. And so from a RevOps perspective, having a more open mind about, being on top of the data, making sure that it's dynamic and that it's being updated and enriched is really important.
Yeah, I mean, and to piggyback on that, I think it goes back to that question about, ripping everything out and starting over again. That should not be the takeaway from the conversation here, right? Because I think, to Brandon's point, where lists are still valuable is showing you that moment in time, right? That validator of, yes, this record went through XYZ steps of whatever sequence, campaign, what have you, right? Almost as that like post validator. What you lose with the list, right? Let's talk about that lookalikes process. If we're just now like really painting the bigger picture, is lookalikes, that filter leans on several parameters. It's not just like revenue or headcount only, and then we're just dumping some fuzzy matches at you. You would be losing the ability to leverage something like that, where AI can kind of more intelligently cut through the noise and give you valuable prospects, versus if somebody's sitting in front of the computer and making arbitrary decisions about what doesn't quite fit a specific subset or segment in a static list that you're going to start the campaign with, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's just like the change for next year is all around this static transactional versus like organic growth mindset. And it's so small, but so pivotal, and like really being able to tap into that psychology. I am going to try to round this out with 3 minutes left. A few ways that we want you all to be using AI to think differently within your orgs. One, as a macro call out, unstructured data is a gold mine. And so a lot of that can live inside of your HubSpot system, and you can tap it in with Apollo. But the sales calls, the service calls, the emails, the recorded videos, big conversation. Salespeople absolutely have to stop writing cold emails. I mean, shout out to Will Davidson, former growther. Man, he wrote some bad emails. I am so happy he has these tools wherever he is. I know exactly where he is. We love you. Organic segmentation versus list. We talked a lot about that. Use these AI power-ups to keep your group of people that you want to talk to growing, not static. Accountability and sentiment. You'll be able to find early warning signs when campaigns and even in your service team lean into these tools. Lead resource prioritization. You're going to get, when you're using this stuff and you're using it right, you're going to get busy. Use these AI tools to help create the lead scoring at the top of the funnel and post discovery. And that way you can focus on the most important conversations first. Everybody deserves a little time, yes, but like I said, things get busy. With 2 minutes left, I'm sorry, maybe we'll do leveraging AI as just its own thing. I'm closing out with a shameless plug. We put all of these resources together in partnership with HubSpot and Apollo. No one's been able to do that before. It's taken me years of begging and pleading to make this happen. Growth is specifically designed and built to give you a resource to help you vet the software, demo the software, buy the software, have it implemented, train your team, you name it. Like myself and the rest of the directors at Growth have literally curated an entire team stack to help you out with this. So if you have any questions, ping me on LinkedIn, shoot a flare into the air, whatever way seems best for you. I really appreciate you spending the time watching this. To Brandon, Apollo, Brandon Growth, and Amber Growth, you all are just so crazy smart. I'm honored to spend time with you. Hopefully this helped everybody out, and looking forward to keeping this conversation going. Boom, 18 seconds left. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you guys. Both Brandon, thanks, Barry.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. So.
All right. How do we let Jessica know that we've ended?